$100, sir. Any advance at $1,600.
Lot 15 is a painting by John Biggers, Market Women in Ghana. It's oil on canvas from the early 1960s. John Biggers is an African-American artist that reintroduced African art, African culture to many African Americans. In 1957, he went on a very important UNESCO-sponsored trip to Ghana and traveled West Africa and brought back many ideas and drawings that are incorporated in this type of painting. This is an early work of his most celebrated period. John Biggers started early in the WPA movement as a muralist. He was a student of Charles White, but he worked through the 50s, 60s, and 70s until recently, and he's a well-known modern painter. We see his works in museum collections and across the country. This is a great work by John Biggers. It's a large oil painting. It really shows African women and their importance in African culture, and it shows a lot of his compositional elements and the complex style that he did in his most famous murals at the same time. Lot 23, General Moses, or Harriet Tubman, is a monumental ink drawing by Charles White. This work is one of his most significant large-scale drawings from the mid-1960s, and it's really a wonderful example of his work. And this drawing was actually commissioned by Golden State. It's one of the few artworks that we know that was directly commissioned. And Charles White had a very close relationship with Golden State Mutual Life. In this year, in 1965, he began teaching at the Otis Art Institute, which is an art school in Los Angeles. He also was a friend of William Pajot, who had invited him to do this drawing. And he also began teaching Saturday classes at Golden State, where high school students were introduced to the collection and shown works by African American artists. Charles White is really a graphic artist, a master draftsman who is creating monumental drawings, not paintings, at the time of abstract expressionism. Works on paper, drawings, and prints are really what Charles White excelled in. And this is a large drawing showing a very intense portrait of an intense woman, an impressive person. Harriet Tubman was the leader of the Underground Railroad, a great African-American heroine, and she greeted every worker at Golden State every day because this work was displayed in the lobby and it filled the space and was a majestic, impressive presence there. She was there to greet everybody and remind them of the struggles that they had before and the struggles to come. In 1965, in Los Angeles, there were race riots. Watts was occupied the National Guard, and here she is, a reminder of past struggles and the hopes for the future. Lot 35 is David Hammond's Moving to the Other Side, a body print monotype from 1969. David Hammons is probably one of the most sought-after contemporary artists working today, but here we have a very early example of one of his works that he's famous for. These are life-scale body prints, his own body pinned against paper. And this is a great example because it's very early. It's from 1969. He started doing this in 1968. He began doing body art as a student at the Otis Art Institute, where he actually studied under Charles White. At the time when he came to the Otis Institute, David Hammons really didn't know the history of African American artists or the importance of someone like Charles White. It really introduced him to the history of art. But David Hammons really has taken an important step here in exploring self-identity in his own special way. He's actually coded himself and pressed against the paper. It's described in the catalog in such that he's coated with margarine or his clothes and pressed against paper, and later the paper is inked with powdered ink It looks very photographic. It's very deceiving. People look at these and think they're screen prints, they think that they're watercolors, but it's a body art monotype. That's probably the best way to describe it. Today, David Hammons is really known for his installation artwork, his assemblage with found objects, but this piece really shows a very important early creative period for him. A period that we really don't see much today, and it's certainly not at auction. Lot 49 is a oil on canvas board by Samela Lewis from 1975, Field Hands. Samela Lewis is well known as a painter and printmaker, but she's also a very important writer and art historian. She was one of the first artists to document the experiences of artists in Los Angeles in the mid-1960s, and she's written extensively about other African-American artists. She's currently writing a monograph on the sculptor Richmond Barthé. Samela Lewis paints figurative works that show the toils and struggles of everyday life, and here she shows migrant workers working in California, taking a break. And it's painted in a thick impasto style. It's really just a wonderful example of her work, a poignant painting. Lot 73 is Elizabeth Catlett's sculpture El Embrazo, The Embrace, a mahogany sculpture from 1978. This is one of the highlights of the sale. This is a large mahogany sculpture. The single piece of wood really embodies the emotions expressed here, a human embrace, and it's beautifully represented in a beautiful piece of wood which accentuates the curves of the figures, and with the painted details really sums up a lot of her interest in sculpture. Last February, we offered a piece by Elizabeth Catlett, and this is a much larger, more complex sculpture work by her, and it really has all the characteristics you'd want in Elizabeth Catlett's sculpture: the attention to the material, the strong figural statement, and the emotions that she's represented here. Elizabeth Catlett is not really part of the California or Los Angeles art scene that Golden State represents, but she's a master of African American and American art. She's really one of the most important sculptors working in the 20th century. Since 1947, she's been living in Mexico. She lives in Cuernavaca, but her work is known internationally today. And this is a wonderful example. It's very difficult to find such a large, developed work by Elizabeth Catlett in the secondary market today. We are thrilled to have, just as the second sale of our new department, such a historic, important private collection. This is one of the oldest private collections of African American art in the country. This is a great chance to see a wonderful historic collection that has largely been behind private doors. And it is a special chance to see historic works and works of a great period of artistic activity, great achievements by African American artists.